ونستعينه ونتوكل عليه ونستغفره من سيئات أعمالنا، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to begin by thanking the organizers for their invitation. I am going to be a guest here of your community for the next month, and I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first to make the month of Ramadan a blessed month for everyone, and to grant me the power to be able to discharge my responsibility during this month the way I should, inshallah. يقول الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أفمن أسس بنيانه على تقوى من الله ورضوان خير أم من أسس بنيانه على شفا جرف نار فانهار به في نار جهنم والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. Surah Tawbah, verse 109. So is one who rests his foundation upon reverence for God and his contentment better, or one whose foundation is based on brink of a crumbling block, which then crumbles with him into the fire of hell? God will not guide the wrongdoers. The month of Ramadan brings with it a kind of approach by the scholars or the speakers to focus on the ayah 183, Surah Al-Baqarah, which is primarily focuses on fasting. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam. And they try to address the two major concepts that exist in this first verse, and that is the relationship between taqwa and fasting. What kind of fasting would lead to taqwa, and what is taqwa in the first place, that we are supposed to work hard to achieve it during this month? The understanding of taqwa, a correct understanding and perception of taqwa, would help us in defining exactly what kind of fasting we should do. Should it be purely abstinence from food and drink, or there is something beyond it that we need to focus upon? And the food and drink in itself is just what we call it, the path to taqwa. There's something that we should pay attention to. There are over 150 verses in the Holy Quran that focuses in one way or the other on the concept of taqwa and its root derivatives. And they are spread all over the Quran. What we have here in Surah Al-Baqarah, for example, ayah 183, is just one of them. The verse that I recited from Surah At-Tawbah 109 also uses the concept of taqwa to distinguish between those who succeed and ultimately benefit from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and those who fail. It says that those who create their foundation, rest their foundation upon reverence of God, فمن أسس بنيانه على تقوى من الله ورضوان خير. Those who rest the foundation of their faith, the foundation of their life, on reverence of Allah and submission to the command of Allah, or the one that rests the foundation on now this is the metaphor, on the brink of a crumbling bank, which then crumbles with them. So anything else apart from Allah is temporary and ultimately crumbles. So this distinction between those people who rest their life according to the taqwa and reverence to Allah are considered to be the one that ultimately will succeed. The goal of Ramadan, if we want to focus upon it, Ramadan is supposed to serve as a training ground for a believer, if we understand it properly. We have a period of 29 or 30 days, depending on the sighting of the moon, because Islamic calendar primarily rests on a lunar calendar rather than a solar calendar. And sighting of the moon changes, sometimes 29 days, sometimes 30 days. And the focus during this 29 or 30 days must be, number one, to break away from bad habits, remove them, and then replace them with good habit. In khutbah, a sermon of Sha'baniyah, which you can go to Google and check it, and it's available, various translations as well. The Holy Prophet delivered a sermon for the mu'mineen, or those who were present in Medina, during the last Friday of the month of Sha'ban, in which he clearly states in it that as you go and read it, at the end of it, فَإِنَّ الشَّقِيِّ مَنْ حَرُمَ غُفْرَانُ اللَّهِ فِي هَذَا الشَّهْرِ الْعَظِيمِ. The most cursed individual is the one that does not benefit from the mercy and blessing of Allah during this month. So the essence that we have to focus upon is, how do we structure our fast that it goes beyond purely abstinence from food and drink and creates that spiritual enlightening that we are supposed to gain. Through the abstinence of food and drink and desires, we are supposed to work hard to reach the peak of our state of morality. So taqwa, in essence, is a change of state. Not just something that we go through, it's from one state to another state. A state which rests on material and nafs al-ammara and submission to the desire, to a state in which we structure our life based on the desire and the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This transition is the difficult part, if we can do it. Now, if I may use, now these days, most of you are aware of one way or another of the phrase detoxification, whether in the material, physical sense, that purely abstinence from food and drink, those of you who are in medical field understand it, enhances the metabolic process that ultimately expels the toxin from the body, and the body begins to repair itself. Huge amount of articles exist. Now it's become literally something everybody knows about, particularly those of you who are familiar with keto diet and the process of long fasting. That body begins to rejuvenate itself once you prevent stuffing it up with all these foods and everything else. The same thing happens in the spiritual sense, because we have, according to a hadith, all spiritual ailment that we have, that we accumulate over the whole 11 months before month of Ramadan. The consequence of this is considered in the narrative of a hadith as awsakh, filth. If you remember, during month of Sha'ban, Munajat Sha'baniyah, Imam, it states, فَشَكَرْتُكَ بِإِدْخَالِي فِي كَرَمِكَ. I thank you, O Lord, that you took me into your generosity. لِتَطْهِيرَ قَلْبِي مِنْ أَوْسَاخِ الْغَفْلَةِ. And you helped me in removing some of the dirt and the filth that had accumulated on the heart. So our heart rusts the same way that anything else. And that is the most difficult thing to deal with and purify. So month of Ramadan becomes a period of detoxification, both on a spiritual sense and on the physical sense. You rejuvenate your body, allow it to fix some of the problems that it has. Please go and read some of these articles. What happens if you fast more than 5 hours or 6 hours, particularly if you go through the dry fast that they call the month of Ramadan as a dry fast, because you don't eat anything, you don't drink anything for a longer period. See what happens to you after 5 days, after 7 days, after 10 days, after 15 days, and ultimately it creates this youth feeling within the body because it removes the toxin. Our spirit must go through the same process. And month of Ramadan is the classic month in which this process must be attained. So there is a reason why Quran says كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. There is a direct synthesis, relationship between the taqwa and the fasting if it is done properly. If we really pay attention to the spiritual component, at least as much as we pay attention to the physical component, if not, we should pay more attention to it, then this purification of the soul rejuvenates the body, and hopefully after 20 days, 30 days, you get into a habit of watching what you do. Because part of one of the process that our scholars, they talk about during the month of Ramadan is for the Ramadan to transform somebody from one state of living into another state of living. Part of it is what we call being mindful of what we do all the time. Muhasaba. We have become, everything that we do, we ask ourselves. If the goal is taqwa, the goal is achieving that purification of the soul, then if I go to talk something, is this going to get me closer to the taqwa and submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not? When I look around, if it is something forbidden, does that help me in the process of taqwa? If la samahallah, God forbid, Israel comes and takes me at the moment that I'm committing a sin, what answer do I have before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when I stand before the sacred court and says, why did you do this? Sometimes we have the opportunity to do tawbah. And by the way, this process of moving from one state that we are in, which is literally we call it egocentric state, into a state where we become God conscious, this transition requires tawbah as number one step towards it. Without tawbah, we are not going to get anywhere. Because tawbah means, inshallah, tomorrow night probably we spend some time on the concept of tawbah. Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullah salam alayhi, somebody went to him. Somebody went to him in front of him and said, Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayh. Imam turned around and said, Ya Fulan, do you know what is the meaning of istighfar? Istighfar has 6 stages. Number 1 is to be regretful of the past. You reflect upon what's happened, what we have done in the past, and we become regretful of the past. 80 years, 50 years, 40 years, more, less, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with this life, and we have wasted it. We haven't done much in preparation for the hereafter. We haven't sent anything forward for the hereafter. And the first step in Tawbah is to reflect on the past and become regretful of the past. The second stage is to clear determination that I'm not going back to the past. These are the first phase. Then we focus on huququllah, huquq nas, etc., etc. But we need to reflect on the past and understand that the past has been, the life has been wasted. Let's be frank. If I might blind somebody else with some kind of deception or anything else, I can't cheat or kid myself. What have I done with my life from the beginning up to now? If Israel comes to me and says, okay, let's go, your time is up. Do I have anything to present on the day of judgment? If not, then the sooner we start repairing that process and rejuvenating ourselves, the better it is. This is critical, most importantly, for the youth. The more senior generations, yes, they have to be mindful of it, that sooner or later we have to go. But the younger generations are the one that they have to get into a habit of not committing sins in the first place, so that you don't get to my age with a pile of sins and everything else on your back that you need to answer on the day of judgment. Don't get into the sin. That's why there is a hadith from the Holy Prophet ﷺ that says, he said, I like the youth more than I like the seniors. Why? Because when my message and risala came, the older, the senior one that habitually had fallen into the worship of idols and everything else, they challenged me while the youth accepted me. The youth are the one that have not got into the habitual sinfulness, and they are very much in line of moving around to be guided. That applies to our youth today as much as it happened in the past. The parents' responsibility is not to allow the kids, the adolescents, the children to move into a direction when sinfulness or forgetfulness becomes habitual. Ghafla means forgetfulness. So when the hadith says that you protect yourself from sinfulness or forgetfulness, means you make yourself constantly. The essence of taqwa means what? To remember Allah in all times. No more, no less. In a nutshell. Once you begin this process of remembering Allah, you acquire all kinds of Islamic values. And you remove some of the negative traits that you have. Inshallah, during probably tomorrow, the day after, I will focus on the ailment of the tongue that literally killing us spiritually, destroying our spirit. Backbiting, tuhma, slander, wasting of the time, talking lower or demeaning other people, etc., etc. This ailment of the tongue, how do we cure it? It's critical. So what we really need to do technically is to protect ourselves from all of these ailments. Waqa in Arabic language means to protect. So we protect ourselves by being mindful of our responsibilities towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and being mindful. One of the major issues that we have to be, and this was critical at the beginning of the Risala of the Holy Prophet, and it's still the same, is the fact that the life can end at any moment, and there is a hereafter and a question. Because the Arab of Jahiliyyah before Islam, the notion of resurrection, one day, if you read verses of the Holy Quran, clearly they talk about this. They were mocking the Prophet. They say, look at him. He says that after we have this, our body has disintegrated all and turned into dust, we are going to be resurrected all over again. This concept didn't exist. This is why at the beginning of the Islamic history, the Holy Prophet, the 13 years in Mecca, focused on three principles. Tawheed, Nubuwwah, and particularly Ma'ad, the hereafter. You can distinguish verses that are Makki from the Madanis by looking at these three principles. You see them again and again and again existing in these surahs. So the notion of hereafter, if we really deep down believe, not just know it, knowledge is not. I know that a car might come or hit me outside, but do I take the necessary precaution when I cross the road? Not necessarily. Knowledge of the hereafter doesn't stop you. It's the belief in the hereafter that it is going to happen and is going to. We are going to stand before that court and answer back for our deed, for everything. Look at the verses in the Holy Quran. Says that your ears, your tongues, your eyes, your skin, everything are going to witness against you on the day of judgment. In addition to the book, اقرأ كتابك. This is your own book. Read it. You don't need somebody else to come and read for you. At the moment where the veils are removed from our eyes, فَبَصَرُكَ الْيَوْمَ حَدِيدٌ. Now you have a sharp vision. You see what you have done in the past and what is the consequence of that as far as the future. This is the concept of taqwa is here. That we equip ourselves and we go through the fasting in a manner that gradually remove the shortcomings, the negative traits one by one, and we replace them with positive traits. Otherwise, we haven't done much during the month of Ramadan. A few nights ago, we were talking about, I think last night or the night before, we were talking with Dr. Zaid regarding this. I said I used the metaphor of input-output box. If we imagine the month of fasting as an input-output box, a character that goes in must be totally different from a character that comes out. Otherwise, we haven't done much. If the same character goes in with all the shortcomings, I lie before, I cheat before, I backbite before, I do all the slanders and everything else, and I come out of the month of Ramadan, I do exactly the same thing. What has been the purpose of fasting? What benefit did I get from the fasting? This is the one that the Holy Prophet says, فَإِنَّ الشَّقِي, the wretched person is the one مَنْ حُرِمَ غُفْرَانُ اللَّهِ فِي هَذَا الشَّهْرِ الْعَظِيمِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala literally has done everything possible for us. The door to heaven is open. The door to hell is closed. Shaitan is chained. Even your sleep is going to be considered ibadah. Why? Because this way you control your tongue, you don't say much. Let's be honest, most of our sins, brothers and sisters, happen during the day, not during the night when we are sleeping. Is when you wake up, you can't control your tongue. And social media, unfortunately, help us in this regard. Waste the time, sit down and just get through the conversation without thinking about whether it is Toma, Riba has a base or not has a base. And that is the way that we really need to pay attention to that during the month of Ramadan. And the best khutbah by the way, the concept of taqwa that mentioned in the verse 109, Surah Tawbah, the essence of taqwa is also exists in a hadith from Ahlul Bayt. Nahj al-Balagha, concept of taqwa is a fundamental principle that Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam alayhi uses repeatedly during in various khutbahs and sermons to distinguish between those who are on the right path and they other ones that they are on the wrong path. The best khutbah is the khutbatul muttaqeen in Nahj al-Balagha. Go and read it. The translation of it is available. When one of the disciples of Imam comes to him, Hammam, Hammam ibn Shurayh, and says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, sifli al-muttaqeen. Describe the true muttaqeen and believers to me. Imam first avoids giving him a straight answer. So he go to the first section of the khutbah, gives him some basic ideas. Imam is not happy with it. He said, no, I want more. So Imam lists about over 100 characteristics of a muttaqi. How they control themselves, as far as their relationship, social responsibilities, as far as their relationship with the parents and the children and everybody else, as far as the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the availability to support the poor and the needy, etc., but particularly focuses on the concept of prayers and the way they submit to the command of Allah. A muttaqi is a one that has a lifestyle that submits, follows the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the muttaqi. We can say it that muttaqi as the one first that lives in total awe regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Allah's majesty and fear His wrath. And that's the one on the concept of the mu'ad. That if we don't do our best, the consequence on the day of judgment is going to be extremely. So becomes a state of heart and mind that has been, since I used the phrase detoxification, that has been completely cleansed. This is the challenge. The relationship between fasting to be done in a manner that ultimately leads us to the taqwa and being mindful of our responsibilities. We have a number of verses in the Holy Quran, since the story of Genesis was read by one of the brothers here at the beginning, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the malaika that I'm going to create human being, and they say, what kind of humans you're going to create that has various default in the character. At that moment, Shaitan promised that is going to challenge us, human beings, left, right, center, front, back, in any way or shape possible. And I read one of the ayah, Surah Al-A'raf, verse number 16, فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي لَأَقْعُدَنَّ لَهُمْ صِرَاطَكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. You created something that I felt. I'm going to sit for them on the right path and lead them astray. ثُمَّ لَآتِيَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ. Right, left, front, back, I will attack them to misguide them from the right path. It's because of that challenge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls Shaitan adu, the enemy number one for humans. فَاتَّخَذُوهُ عَدُوًّا, Quran says, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ فَاتَّخَذُوهُ عَدُوًّا إِنَّمَا يَدْعُو حِزْبَهُ لِيَكُونُوا مِنْ أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. There's only one goal Shaitan has, to deviate us and ultimately lead us to Jahannam. So if we want to correct ourselves, we have to stay away from any lifestyle that Shaitan agrees with, which means we have to sit down and reflect. What kind of a lifestyle I need to choose that Shaitan disagrees with? A lifestyle the Nafs al-Ammara agrees with leads to Shaitan. A lifestyle that Nafs al-Ammara disagrees with is the beginning of the path towards taqwa and consciousness, of God consciousness. So these are various issues that inshallah during these nights we will spend time in clarifying. But as I said, the relationship between fasting to purify the physique. Most people that talk about fasting, they simply focus on the physical advantage of fasting. Because unfortunately, the notion that human spirit, human soul, etc., needs cleansing as well. In the Western understanding of things, they don't exist. Yes, in the light of some religious, say Christian or Jewish or some other belief, there is a degree of spirituality that they focus upon, but not as intense as it exists in Islam. If we want these things to be clarified, to be cleansed, the soul to be cleansed, the spirit to be cleansed, we need to choose a path. And this is what Orafa and mystics, they call it Sayr and Suluk, the wayfaring. That you literally start from where we are. The ultimate goal is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and reaching Allah. And this path that we have to navigate, full of mines and difficulties, we really have to break it down into step by step by step. Beginning with Tawbah, then focusing on removal of the negative trait, replacing them with positive traits, and inshallah moving forward by. Otherwise, if there is no Tawbah, if there is no regret of the past, even if we fill the entire month of Ramadan with recitation of Quran, as soon as we walk away from the month of Ramadan, we go back to the crooked old way, it's not going to do much. Muttaqi, if we can manage during the month of Ramadan to benefit even by removing one negative trait, controlling our tongue is much better than packing up every night, particularly the 3 nights of Qadr with all recitation. But as soon as the month of Ramadan is over, we forget all about it and we go back to the lifestyle that we had chosen before. Inshallah, I will stop here, and if there are questions, we will discuss them, and inshallah, we talk about follow up these topics tomorrow night and then the month after. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sayyid, I have a question. Thank you very much for your lecture, mashallah. Uh, with regard to the Salatul Jama'ah, what are the rules for the people who are standing behind the Imam? So, do we need to recite the Surah Al Fatiha and the other surahs followed by the Surah Al Fatiha?
In Salat al Jama'ah, the recitation of the Imam suffices for the Ma'mum that is standing behind him. Not, he or she they don't need to recite Surah Al-Hamd and any other surah that goes after it. However, they are responsible for the dhikr in ruku', in sujood, in qunut, tashahhud, and everything else. But the qira'ah of the Imam, Hamd and Surah, they don't need to recite. However, if somebody wants to recite based on istihbab, recommendation, not because it's wajib, just something that one does during, some people do it, then that's fine. But they have to understand that technically in Salat al-Jama'ah, recitation of the Imam replaces what their own recitation. They don't need to do it.
And then while the recitation, do we need to say anything like the zikr, like Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, or just listen?
I think the best thing would be to focus and not say anything, because anything that you say would distract you from what is being said. So if we can focus on what the Imam is reciting and understand the meaning of Hamd and Surah, it will be much better than saying any mustahabbat. So when Imam says Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, if we focus exactly what does the Imam say, what does it mean for you to say that I praise Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, the Lord of here and the hereafter. All these meanings are much more critical than recitation, but some people they do it. Focusing on the prayer is much better than reciting.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. اللهم صل على So, inshallah, tomorrow night we will start with the topic or theme of Tawbah. And my style of lecture, I'll spend the first 5 minutes recapping on some of the points that I previously mentioned in the previous lecture, in case there are people that come in and they are not haven't heard it. At least that will give them something to move into the theme of the conversation. And if you have any questions, please prepare it, and I'll be more than happy to deal with them. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا باعث الهدى، السلام عليك يا طه وياسين، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين وعلى السلام عليك يا عنيس النفوس، السلام عليك يا أيها المدفون بالزتوس، السلام عليك يا ابن عليك الأربعوت، السلام عليك يا سلطان الأرب والعجم، علي ابن موسى أيها الرضا الرازي بالقدر والقضاء ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا مولاي صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان الأمان الأمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كامل الكفر والطغيان، السلام عليك يا دافع الظلم والعدوان، أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته، اللهم صل على Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Surah Fatiha is requested for Sayyida Nahid Naqvi, daughter of Sayyida Taqi Hassan Naqvi, and for all the marhumin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin ar-Rahman ar-Rahim Maliki yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. And 3 times Amma Ujibul for all the people who are not feeling well here and elsewhere in this world. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Amma Ujibul Mustarra iza da'a wa yakshafa su. Amma Ujibul Mustarra iza da'a wa yakshafa su. Amma Ujibul Mustarra iza da'a wa yakshafa su. Allahumma salli ala